Okay, well, moving on to Chapter 18 in Evolution unit, we have 18.1, which is Finding Order and Diversity. The goal is to describe how and why organisms are hierarchically classified and how they are based on evolutionary relationships. So our far side is stimulus response behavior in dogs. Fell down, wagging his tail. Okay, so our objectives are to describe the goals of binomial nomenclature and systematics and identify the taxa in the classification system devised by Linnaeus. All right, let's think about it. Scientists have been trying to identify, name, and find order in the diversity of life for a very long time. The first scientific system for naming and grouping organisms was set up long before Darwin. In recent decades, biologists have been completing a changeover from that older system of names and classification to a new strategy based on evolutionary theory. So our first objective is to describe the goals of binomial nomenclature and systematics. So the first step in understanding and studying diversity is to describe and name each species. By using a scientific name, biologists can be sure that they are discussing the same organism. Common names can be confusing because they vary among languages and from place to place. For example, the names of cougar, puma, panther, mountain lion can all be used to indicate the same animal, which is the biological name is Felis concolor. So in the 18th century, European scientists agreed to assign Latin or Greek names to each species. Early scientific names often use long phrases to describe species in great detail. For example, the English translation of the scientific name of a tree might be oak with deeply divided leaves that have no hairs on their undersides and no teeth around their edges. It was also difficult to standardize names because different scientists focus on different characteristics. In the 1730s, a Swedish botanist, Carolus Linnaeus, developed a two-word naming system called the binomial nomenclature. The scientific name usually is Latin and is written in italics. The first word begins with a capital letter, and the second word is then lowercased. The polar bear, for example, is called Ursus maritimus. The first part of the name, Ursus, is the genus to which the organism belongs. Remember, a genus is a group of similar species. The genus Ursus contains 5 other species of bears, including Ursus arctos, or the brown bear or grizzly bear. The second part of the scientific name, maritimus, for polar bears, is unique to each species and is often a description of the organism's habitat or of an important trait. The Latin word for maritimus refers to the sea. Polar bears often live on pack ice that floats in the sea. Another example is the scientific name for the red maple is Acer rubrum. The genus Acer consists of all maple trees. The species rubrum describes the red maple's color. In addition to naming organisms, biologists, go back a second, try to organize or classify living and fossil species into larger groups that have biological meaning. Biologists refer to these groups as taxa, or singular taxon. So the scientific name of grouping in organisms is called systematics. Anyhow, objective 1 again was to describe the goals of binomial nomenclature and systematic. And the goals in binomial nomenclature is each species is assigned a 2-part scientific name. And the goal of systematics is to organize living things into groups that have biological meaning. Objective 2 is identify the taxa in the classification system devised by Linnaeus. So, Linnaeus also developed a classification system that organized species into a hierarchy of ranking. In deciding how to place organisms into larger groups, Linnaeus grouped species according to anatomical similarities and differences. Linnaeus identified just 4 levels in his original classification system. Over time, Linnaeus's original classification system would expand to include 7 taxa, or levels, and they are species, genus, family, order, class, phylum, and kingdom. The scientific name of a camel with 2 humps, for example, is Camelus bacterianus. Let's go back to that. All right. The illustration shows how a bacterian camel, Camelus bacterianus, is a group within each Linnaean category. The genus Camillus contains other species, like Camillus dromedaris, the dromedary with only one hump. Species, genus, very specific, and then genus is a little more broad. The South American llama does bear some resemblance to the Bactrian camels and dromedaries, but the llama is more closely related to other South American species than it is to the European and Asian camels. Therefore, llamas are placed in a different genus, llama. Llama. Their species name is, get this, llama glama. Genera that share many similarities are grouped into a larger category, the family in this case. Closely ranked families are grouped into the next larger rank called an order. Camels and llamas, family Camelidae, are grouped with several other animal families including deer, family Cervidae, and cattle, family Bovidae, I'm not saying that right, into the order Artiodactyla, which are hoofed animals with an even number of toes. Did you know that? And then close related orders are grouped into the next larger rank, which is called a class. The order Artiodactyla is placed in the class Mammalia, which includes all animals that are warm-blooded, have body hair, and produce milk for their young. Got squirrels in there. Classes are then grouped into phylums. A phylum includes organisms that are different but share important characteristics. The class Mammalia is grouped within birds, class Aves, and reptiles, class Reptilia, amphibians, class Amphibia, and all classes of fish into the phylum Chordata. These organisms share important body features, among them a curved nerve cord along the back. They all have a nerve cord. In a way, members of a species determine which organisms belong to that species by deciding with whom they mate and produce fertile offspring. Ranks above the level of species, however, determined by researchers who decide how to define and describe genera, families, orders, classes, phyla, and kingdoms. Linnaeus grouped organisms into larger taxa according to overall similarities and differences. But which similarities and differences are the most important? For example, adult barnacles in limpets live attached to rocks and have similar looking shells. Adult crabs don't look anything like barnacles and limpets. Based on these features, one would classify limpets and barnacles together and crabs in a different group. However, they would be wrong. Modern classification schemes, lipids, barnacles, crabs, Modern classification schemes look beyond overall similarities and differences and group organisms based on evolutionary relationships. All right, so objective 2 is identify the taxa and classification system divided by Linnaeus. So over time, Linnaeus's original classification system would expand to include 7 hierarchical taxa: species, genus, family, order, class, phylum, and kingdom, which I'm sure you have some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It's late now. It's not early, it's late. I just forgot. Anyhow, you know what I meant, I hope. All right. Some way to remember those in order is what I'm trying to get to. We'll work on that in class. All right. So describe the goals of binomial nomenclature and systematics. Identify the taxa and classification system devised by Linnaeus. And that goal is describing how and why organisms are hierarchically classified. And we also will get on evolutionary relationships. A little cute crabby for you. Enjoy.